אחד.
החימוש הבא. יש פיצוץ. אלפא.
Israel has, since the ceasefire with Hezbollah in Lebanon, rockets and missiles have still been fired, and drones actually, from Yemen, where there is an Iranian-backed terrorist organization called the Houthis, who are supported by Iran, have developed and acquired over the years very sophisticated weapons, mostly ballistic missiles, as well as some Iranian drones. And they have, since last October 7th, when the attacks began against Israel by Hamas, have also been attacking Israel periodically, a missile here, a missile there, a drone here, and a drone there. In the end, even though the main battle with Hezbollah has ended with the ceasefire, and Iran has also stood down from its threats to attack Israel, the Houthis are still attacking. And Israel has said that they will respond to these Houthi attacks from Yemen. They had vowed already last week that an attack would come soon, and that is when Israel's retaliation finally took place this week. It took place, though, important to point out, after the Houthis had fired another missile that struck Israel. And on December 19th, it struck a school just to the east of Tel Aviv in a city called Ramat Gan. Thankfully, the school was not full of anyone. It was the middle of the night. But Israel then decided to carry out its attack about 2,000 kilometers from the state of Israel. Dozens of fighter jets, spy planes, refueling air tankers, flew the distance to Yemen, and took out a bunch of different targets associated with the Houthi terrorist organization. The missiles are usually, for the most part, intercepted. Israel does have very sophisticated missile defense systems, particularly the Arrow. There's the Arrow 2 and the Arrow 3, and they're very effective at intercepting some of these more longer range ballistic missiles, which are the ones that the Houthis fire. By the way, the Houthis missiles that they do fire are Iranian made. So these are missiles made in Iran, provided to this terrorist group in a proxy of Iran based in Yemen. And we all know just how dysfunctional and the country of Yemen is because of the fights between the Houthis and the official Yemeni government. But the missile was mostly intercepted, but parts of it did strike and hit this school. A big part of the school was destroyed. And we can only imagine what would have happened had it been in the middle of a school day and had that happened, right? So thankfully it didn't. Thankfully, no one was injured in that attack, but Israel decided to retaliate in quite an aggressive way, and it struck at a number of ports that were 3 ports that are used by the Houthis along the coast of Yemen, that are used, according to Israel, to bring in weapons for the Houthis. Israel now says that the activity at the ports that are controlled by the Houthis has been paralyzed as a result of its response and its strikes against all these different, there were strikes in Sana'a, the main city, there were strikes in the coastal Hodeidah province, as well as another area called Ras Isa, which is an oil terminal on the Red Sea. This is a war that's not just against Israel and the Houthis, this is a war against Israel and Iran. Iran's strategy, we have to keep in mind, has always been to fight not directly, but to fight via proxies. And there's interest, it's interesting why. What the proxies do is they enable 3 different things. One is they enable Iran to project power far from its borders. So Iran doesn't have a border with Israel, but Lebanon does. Gaza does. So it can invest in Hezbollah in Lebanon. It can invest in Hamas in Gaza. It wants to destabilize the Red Sea area so it can invest in the Houthis in Yemen. So it's able to project power. That's one. 2 is that when the proxies attack on behalf of Iran, the retaliation will be against the proxies and not against Iran. So it's the Houthis who attack. Oh, so the response is against the Houthis. Hamas attacks, the response is against Hamas. Iran gains immunity. And the third reason is that the plausible deniability. Iran can always say it's not me, it's them. Right? I didn't do it, it's those guys. So that has always been the grand strategy of the Iranians. When we look at what's happened over the last 15 months now, since the Hamas invasion of Israel on October 7th and the war that has ensued, if we look at Iran's proxy strategy, it's not going so well right now, right? Iran's prized proxy was Hezbollah, went into this conflict with tens of thousands of fighters, 150,000 rockets and missiles. Israel, during this war, has managed to degrade severely Hezbollah, or significantly Hezbollah's capabilities, has decimated the Hezbollah leadership, has eliminated almost all of its leaders, has destroyed all of its strategic infrastructure and weapons. Hamas also completely degraded, weakened, not really in possession of any more strategic weapons. The Houthis, yeah, they still have occasional missiles, and that can cause terrorism, but nothing that is of a strategic threat the likes it was. And now let's talk about Syria, where the regime of Bashar al-Assad, which was an ally of the Iranians as well, also now gone. So if you look at where Iran was 15 months ago and where it is today, I would say that they are losing overall. Now, of course, Israel went into this war with being on the offside, right? The October 7th attack took the country by surprise, 1,200 people murdered, 251 taken hostage, still 100 hostages being held by Hamas in Gaza. But overall, when you look at the bigger battle between Israel and the Iranian proxy octopus, it's going quite well right now for Israel. And Iran is the one who now is on the offside of all of this. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes forward, but also even more importantly, how Israel is able to preserve the successes that it has had on the battlefield to ensure that they last and they don't dissipate over time. The war in Gaza is pretty much over in the high intensity stage or phase of it, right? Right now, what we're still seeing is, of course, there's pockets of resistance. Hamas still does exist. There are still people who are Hamas members and have guns and weapons, so they can always continue to fight. But overall, the back of the Hamas military machine has been broken. The vast majority of its fighters have been eliminated. Its top leadership has been eliminated. And its weaponry has been destroyed. It no longer really has rockets to fire into Israel, except for just a handful. So that is the case with Hamas. But yes, it still does have infrastructure. There still are tunnels, and it still is in possession of 100 of the hostages. As a result, Israel really is at a crossroads here. Does it continue to try to fight more and hope that maybe through military means it will be able to get back the hostages, or does it try to strike a deal? Where we are now is that the negotiations are really in high gear. We saw the director of the CIA, who was in Doha this past week, alongside Israeli negotiators, Egyptians, and the Hamas negotiators, trying to iron out a deal. It seems that a deal is close. We're talking about a multi-phased deal, so it won't be that all hostages are released at once. Some of the women will be released, the women, the elderly, the sick. Israel will release some prisoners, and Israel will cease fire for a period of time. Then, if all goes okay, the second phase will kick in, and that will be the men and the male soldiers who are being held hostage. Israel will again give over more prisoners. And this is where it gets a little complicated. Hamas wants guarantees that Israel will not renew at all any of its operations. Israel says, we won't give that guarantee. If we see Hamas and we identify them doing something in the terror realm, we will operate. So this is where it's obviously very complicated. And Hamas, from its perspective, with the kidnapping of so many people, this was a strategic blow to Israel because it kind of ties your hands and it makes it difficult to end the war. In other words, Israel can't end the war without the hostages. but it also can't end the war with Hamas still in charge of Gaza. So how do you kind of round out that square where you can get both of your achievements, get back the hostages, prevent Hamas from reconstituting itself as the ruler of Gaza? Not going to be simple. And this is at that point where we're at now, but because the war has winded down, and it's really not at the intensity stage that it once was, this is also a good moment for a deal, not to mention the fact that we're in that window right now, just a month away from Donald Trump taking office. This window does put pressure on all sides to reach a deal. Trump has said he wants a deal. Biden would like a deal before he leaves office to take credit. So you kind of have aligned interests here between Trump, Biden, Israel. We just got to make sure that Hamas is willing to go all the way.